Hello, everyone. Hello, hello, hello. Well, I don't know how long I'm going to be on here, but got some good news. Donald Trump, in like 72 hours, maybe 80 hours, but anyway, Monday morning, 9 o'clock in Manhattan, New York, Donald Trump is set to go on trial in the hush money case for um, the Stormy Daniels case and the lies he told. Um, Jury selection begins. The court case is probably going to take about, they said it'll probably take about, let's see what they said. They said it would probably take about maybe 6 to 8 weeks. It will definitely be over before the election, unless the Supreme Court acts in his favor, which, excuse me, I don't think they are going to. But anyway, this is going to be an interesting case. It's going to be live. Hopefully, somebody will stream it on YouTube so I can see it. And hopefully, the, excuse me, sorry about that. Hopefully, we'll get to see it live. It's, I think it's not I'm not sure if it's going to be in federal court, but I don't know. Hopefully it's going to be live. But anyway, it's going to start the jury selection. It's going to start. I don't know. He seems confident with Donald Trump. You can you cannot underestimate that man by any means. Can you underestimate Donald Trump? Because you know you just can't underestimate him. But we'll see. We'll see. We'll see. We'll see. Because it's really, really, really is. I can't wait for this one. This one is going to be a good one. Uh, hopefully it'll start on time. But who knows? He may get somebody. Oh, hey, Andrea, how you doing? Yeah, Donald Trump is about to go down, honey. Hopefully, hopefully, he will. It will start, and he will be um, convicted. Which everybody is saying he probably will be convicted, but I don't know. With him, you never know, and with that Supreme Court, you don't really know either. But so I'm gonna wait and see if somebody else come up here, which I doubt if they are gonna come, but doesn't matter. I was trying to do it with my YouTube and my YouTube go live, but it just wasn't working today for me. It just kept cutting me off and on and everything. So we're gonna see. I'm going to see about adding something on so you can listen to it. You know, yeah. All right. Share screen. Let's see what's there. I'm going to share the screen. Stream me in Laurie. That ain't what I want. So I'm gonna cancel that. I ain't what I want. We ain't trying to log into that. So I'm going to do this. Hopefully I won't get lost, but if I do, please come back, Andrea. So let me see. Refresh, you know, news. Um, okay, here it is. So I'm hoping this. Um, I got it. I got
Hey,
it.
all.
I
Glenn
got it.
Kirshner
I
here.
got it.
So, are you all ready for Monday? The first criminal trial of Donald Trump is set to begin in a Manhattan courtroom with jury selection on Monday, April 15th. Let's start with some of the new reporting that gives us something of an overview of what to expect. And then I want to spend some time talking about what goes into pretrial preparation of any criminal case, but especially a big, high profile criminal prosecution. But let's start with the new reporting. This from NBC News. Headline: Trump's hush money trial begins Monday. Here's what to expect. And that article begins: Donald Trump will become the first former president to stand trial in a criminal case next week, and he'll do so against the backdrop of a presidential campaign in which he's the presumptive Republican nominee. Jury selection begins Monday in New York City, and the trial is expected to last 6 to 8 weeks. Here's a look at what you need to know and what's expected to happen. How long is jury selection expected to last? Jury selection is expected to last 1 to 2 weeks. A criminal trial involving Trump's company before the same judge in 2022 took a week to select 12 jurors and 5 alternates. What is Trump charged with? Manhattan District Attorney Alvin Bragg charged Trump with 34 counts of first-degree falsifying business records, a low-level felony. What's the prosecution alleging? Prosecutors allege Trump repeatedly and fraudulently falsified New York business records to conceal criminal conduct that hid damaging information from the voting public during the 2016 presidential election. At the heart of the case are allegations of various sex scandals that prosecutors say Trump tried to suppress with the help of his lawyer, Michael Cohen, and top executives in charge of the National Enquirer. In the final days of the election, Cohen paid $130,000 to one woman, adult film star Stormy Daniels, to keep silent about her claim she'd had a sexual encounter with Trump in 2006. Trump has denied the allegation. After he was elected, Trump reimbursed Cohen through a series of checks from his trust that were processed through the Trump Organization and labeled as payments for legal services rendered, a claim the DA says was false. What is Trump's defense? Trump has maintained he didn't do anything wrong. And while he has acknowledged reimbursing Cohen, he said he didn't know the details about what Cohen was doing. Who will testify for the prosecution? Michael Cohen, Stormy Daniels, Karen McDougal, a former Playboy model who said she had an affair with Trump, a claim he denies. David Pecker, a Trump ally who was the CEO of Enquirer publisher AMI at the time. Dylan Howard, another former AMI executive. Former White House Communications Director Hope Hicks. Former Trump assistant Madeleine Westerhout, and others. Will Trump have to be in court every day? Unlike the New York civil fraud and E. Jean Carroll defamation trials, the DA's case is criminal. So Trump is required to be in court every day to participate in his defense. So, friends, what goes into preparing to prosecute a big case? What does pretrial preparation look like? Well, here are some of the highlights based on my experience. First of all, preparation is key. Preparation is king. Preparing a case well does not guarantee success, but failing to prepare a case well pretty much guarantees failure. So pretrial preparation is the key to success. What does some of that preparation look like? First of all, by the time we are on the eve of trial, as we are now in Donald Trump's first criminal prosecution, I will have met with the witnesses many times over. And in the run-up to trial, I will have taken them through a dry run of the direct examination. The exact questions I will ask them once they're on the witness stand in court. I don't want there to be any surprises. I will not only ask them every question I intend to ask them in court, I will show them every exhibit that I'll ask them to identify during their testimony, every photograph, every document, every text message, every email, every contract, every phone record, everything. So they are comfortable, they're at ease, and there are no surprises. I will then conduct a mock cross-examination with the witness. I will try to come up with every possible question, every area of cross-examination that the defense attorney might hit them with to try to give them a sense of what's coming. Now, I will give the witnesses lots of standard advice. For example, first and foremost, this is the most important rule. This is the one non-negotiable I had as a prosecutor and many other prosecutors have. I tell the witnesses, tell the truth, the full truth, the good, the bad, and the ugly, warts and all. If there's some evidence that you think hurts the prosecution, hurts our chances at winning a conviction, you make sure you testify about it fully, accurately, and truthfully. You tell the truth about the stuff that's good for the prosecution. You tell the truth about the stuff that's bad for the prosecution. The truth will set you free, and we demand nothing less. I then try to give them advice like, when you're being cross-examined by the defense attorney, that person might come across as less than friendly, less than cordial, less than polite, less than civil. Maybe they will, maybe they won't. But don't rise to the bait, because often defense attorneys will try to get you angry, will try to confuse you, will try to get you off your game, try to get you to agree to things that aren't necessarily truthful or accurate. Just approach cross-examination, approach, the answers that you give the defense attorney with the same demeanor, the same tone, the same respect as you give the prosecutors when you're answering our questions. And I make sure to tell the witnesses that if the truthful answer to any question is, I don't know, then please say, I don't know. That's a perfectly acceptable answer if it's the truth. Don't try to fill in gaps. Don't try to force memories you don't have. If the answer to a question, the truthful answer is, I don't recall, then that is the answer you give. Now, mind you, if you get asked the question by a defense attorney along the lines of, well, you remember going into the grand jury and on page 84, line 17, didn't you tell the grand jury X, Y, and Z? You can certainly say, sir, ma'am, I don't completely recall what I said about that in the grand jury, but if you can show me my grand jury testimony, my transcript, that would probably help refresh my memory. That is a perfectly acceptable answer to give on cross-examination. Indeed, it's an acceptable answer to give on direct examination when the prosecutor is asking you the question. If you know there's something in your grand jury transcript, but you just can't quite fully recall it right now. So, all of this is really an exercise in telling the truth, in thinking about the question. If a question is confusing, either from the prosecutor or the defense, a perfectly acceptable answer is, can you please rephrase that? I'm not sure what you're asking. And as long as you tell the truth, then everything will work out. And then obviously another part of pretrial preparation, by the time we are, on the eve of trial, I will have drafted and redrafted and fine-tuned and run by my friends and colleagues my opening statement to make sure it is as compelling, concise, and convincing as I can possibly make it. And I'll talk more as the trial progresses about opening statements, direct examination of witnesses, cross-examination of witnesses, closing arguments, rebuttal arguments. We'll talk about jury deliberations. And friends, come Monday, we're going to talk a little bit about jury selection, right? What is it that prosecutors and defense attorneys look for in the perfect juror or in an acceptable juror? And believe me, it varies depending on the case. Um, and if you ask 100 experienced trial court prosecutors and 100 experienced criminal defense attorneys, you're going to get 100 different answers. There will be some similarities, but I have heard people say things like, I never want a lawyer on my jury. I've had people say, I always want a lawyer on my jury. I am more in the latter camp, and I'll talk to you about why that is based on my experience. Some people will say, because a lawyer will second guess all of my legal decisions, my strategy, my tactical decisions. They'll be grading my arguments. They'll be assessing whether my objections are right or wrong. And some people say, well, lawyers kind of understand the process and they know how to apply the rule of law to the facts. And they know how to, weigh evidence and reach supportable credibility determinations. So some people love lawyers on their juries. Some people hate lawyers on their juries. Some people will say, I never want a member of the clergy on my jury. They're too forgiving. Some people will say, I always want a member of the clergy on my jury because they're eye for an eye kind of people. And believe me, trial litigators, criminal practitioners will have opinions about social workers and bus drivers, doctors and scientists, politicians and school teachers, and on and on and on. So I want to dig into the nuts and bolts of jury selection, as I selected well over 100 juries in my time as a career prosecutor, and it's a lot of fun to talk about. I'll do that probably on Monday as jury selection begins in Donald Trump's criminal trial up in New York. And then as the case moves toward opening statements, I'm really excited to talk with you all about what goes into an opening statement, particularly for a prosecutor. That is my frame of reference. That's my comfort level. Mind you, defense attorneys are not required to give opening statements. Remember, defendants never have a burden of proof at trial. The burden of proof never shifts to the defendant. It always remains with the prosecution. The defendant is presumed innocent unless and until the prosecution presents enough evidence to convince a juror of guilt beyond a reasonable doubt. The defendant never has to prove anything. The defendant doesn't have to give an opening statement, doesn't have to call a single witness, doesn't have to present a single item of evidence, doesn't even need to cross-examine the prosecution's witnesses. They can rest on the presumption of innocence and the burden of proof beyond a reasonable doubt. And I've had defense attorneys do that, present nothing. And then at the end of the case, what they argue is, ladies and gentlemen, you weren't even surprised, were you, when I didn't present a single shred of evidence, when I didn't call a single witness? And you already in your heart know why I didn't put on any evidence, because I didn't have to. Because the prosecution failed miserably in its, feeble attempt to prove my client guilty beyond a reasonable doubt. The evidence fell woefully short, so I didn't need to present witnesses. I didn't need to introduce evidence. I barely need to make an argument. All I need to do is ask you all respectfully to go back into the deliberation room and do the right thing based on not the evidence, but the lack of evidence that the prosecution presented to you. Find my client not guilty. Can be a compelling argument. It's often an argument made when the government's evidence is really strong and the defense has no compelling evidence to offer to rebut it. So then you go with, lots of bluff and bluster. There is the old saying that many of you have probably heard: if you've got the facts on your side, pound on the facts. If you've got the law on your side, pound on the law. If you've got neither on your side, just pound on the table. And I have heard my fair share of table pounding in criminal trials that I prosecuted over the years. But let me circle back to opening statements for just a minute. And we're going to talk more about what goes into preparing an opening statement as jury selection winds down, We've got 12 jurors and a series of alternate jurors in the box. And we know that opening statements are about to commence. There are some things about opening statements that are counterintuitive. For example, you want to start strong. You want to start with some of your best, strongest, most compelling evidence when you begin your opening statement to the jury. But the other thing that you need to do, and this may be counterintuitive to folks who don't try criminal cases, is you have to talk about the weaknesses in your case. You have to front the weaknesses to the jury. We call it drawing the sting, because the last thing you want to do is hide evidence that you know will be introduced during the course of the trial, in part because you will introduce it, and let the defense be the first one to spring it on the jury, like the fact that Michael Cohen has lied several times previously. Michael Cohen's going to be a prosecution witness, so the prosecution needs to front load all of that information and talk about it during opening statements, because when you talk about it, you frame it. You suggest to the jury what it means, how important it is, and most importantly, you then begin to talk about all of the corroboration, all of the supporting and affirming Trump and Michael Cohen talking about, doing this dirty hush money payment. You talk about the documents that were signed. You talk about Donald Trump writing the reimbursement checks. You front Michael Cohen's credibility problems, but you frame them for the jury. And you say, notwithstanding his earlier lies, some of which were told to help Donald Trump stay out of hot water, you take that weakness and you turn it to a strength. He was just being loyal to his criminal associate, right? Somebody who is higher up on the criminal food chain than he is, Donald Trump. But you have every reason to credit him, even if he told those lies in the past. But you have to front the bad stuff, the weaknesses, and you have to draw the sting from it by then building it back up during opening statements with the corroboration. I'm going to stop there because I could go on forever. And as you can probably tell, I really miss trying criminal cases. And friends, let me finish with a word of caution. Every criminal trial has ups and downs. One day it will look like things are going really well for the prosecution, for the people of New York, for the people of the United States, when it comes to holding Donald Trump accountable for some of his crimes. And then other days, the reports coming out of the courtroom will shake your confidence in maybe the quality or quantity of the evidence, and you'll begin to be concerned, fearful even. Maybe Donald Trump is not going to be held accountable. There will be ups and downs. It will be, hopefully 2 steps up and 1 step back. So I would say, buckle up. It is going to be a bumpy and perhaps anxiety-producing 6 to 8 weeks, this trial. But based on my assessment of the quality and quantity of the evidence, and what I am absolutely confident of is we probably only know a fraction of the incriminating evidence and information that Alvin Bragg amassed during the course of his investigation. I still have a good feeling about how this trial will play out. I think it will result in guilty verdicts and accountability coming to Donald Trump, finally, for just some of his crimes against the people of New York, and by extension, against we the people. Because justice matters. Friends, as always, please stay safe, please stay tuned, and I look forward to talking with you all again tomorrow.
Well, you heard what he said, right, Andrea? He said he thinks he's going to get a criminal conviction. I don't know. What do you think? I don't think he's going to show up Monday, to be honest with you, because I don't think he ever came this close to being having his butt locked up. But who knows? We'll see on Monday. I think I spelled Monday wrong. It's NOM. I don't know. Anyway, so that's it. That's what I came to do. Oh, excuse me. I don't know nothing else. I'm cold. I'm sitting here with my lightweight jacket on and my hood on my head because I'm cold. Yep. So Monday we'll see. I hope it works out. I hope it works out. Maybe I'll try to get one more thing. Let me see what else I can find that we can that we could listen to about this. Jim says, Weissman and Lawrence O'Donnell. I don't know what they're going to do with them. Who knows if they're going to. Here's this bimbo, Marjorie Taylor Greene. Marjorie Taylor Greene is doing something. He wants to be a dictator. Come Monday, he will be a day one defendant, So, let's see. I'm going to try this.
Technology Group has seen its share value drop by at least 45% since going public, and Greene is apparently a bit salty about it. Doesn't really want to talk about it. Interesting. When asked by NBC News on Wednesday what happened to her Trump media stock, Greene replied, "This is a waste of time. I think you can read my reports and see what I own." Okay. But we would much rather hear it from you. Get it straight from the horse's mouth, so to speak. Maybe there's a good reason as to why she is not too keen on sharing that information. You see, Greene, along with Indiana GOP Representative Larry Bucshon, revealed that they bought stock in the company in October of 2021. That's fine. Plenty of people have bought stock into that company. That's the same month that it announced a merger with Trump Media. Hey, blank check company, DWAC. Of course, again, when they merged it, there was a lot of money. and actually, for some reason, Truth Social is worth billions of dollars. Nobody knows why, but that's what it is. Again, completely divorced from the reality of reality. Let's just say that. Now, just days after the announcement, Greene bought shares of DWAC ranging from 15,000 to 50,000. The ex-account Nancy Pelosi stock tracker points out that as a result of the recent losses in the stock in DJT, this could be a potential loss in value of $33,000. You can see that there's a graph, and actually that was earlier. It's up now, so it's actually over $31 as we speak, but still not good. Very bad. And also, you could just add in, whoopsie. NBC News also pointed out a similar figure. Now, if Greene is still an investor in that company, she would have lost up to $32,000. Bucshon could have lost up to $8,900. So now what makes this funny is the fact that they were early investors, right? They could have dumped the stock and made a ton of money when that stock was high. You buy low, sell high, right? Now, did that happen? Well, a spokesman for Bucshon responded to inquiries and revealed that the lawmaker is still an investor in the company. Greene, however, well, you heard her answer. She won't say. She won't say. Look at my reports. Now, if you look at those reports, public disclosures have shown that she has not sold any stock related to DWAC or Trump Media. So, I mean, there's that. She didn't sell it, as far as we know. But wait, we'll get to that right? Green spokesperson Nick Dyer told NBC News that Green holds no stocks at this time, as reflected in her financial disclosure. So if she didn't sell it and she holds no stocks, where did they go? I mean, that's very curious, right? It's a good question. Show it does not mean that she doesn't own any stock. According to the Campaign Legal Center, this is counsel Kedrick Payne, if the value of Green stock drops below $1,000, wow, she is not required to disclose any information. So that would be a massive drop in value, disastrous, right? And hilarious because she lost all the money. I mean, I'm sorry. I'm not going to feel bad at Marjorie Green investing in Truth Social, which we knew was a joke, a meme stock, not anything that a serious investor is going to ride in for the long term, right? Be in for the long haul. I'm not gonna feel sorry about that, right? Her losing all that money. There could also be a different explanation. She could have recently sold the stock, which would be far funnier. And here's what. Now, if she sold the stock, that would give her up to 45 days where she doesn't have to disclose anything under the Stock Act. Members of Congress routinely violate the Stock Act, so there's a good chance that she either owns it, hasn't reported it, or has sold it and hasn't reported it. So either way, she would have taken massive losses. Okay. So what's funny about her possibly selling it, though, is that it would piss off Trump and his supporters to no end to see that she abandoned Truth Social because it was losing money. I mean, much funnier than her just losing money, her abandoning it, saying, all right, I'm going to offload this piece of crap. I mean, I don't know. Either way, not good for her. Green, understandably, maybe seeing red. Social media, upon hearing this news, said, oh, poor Marge. C. Twin writes, hoping like MT Green, the stock has no low to which it can sink. Getting insider trading info. Hey, you know what? That is, I guess it's an upside, right? To be fair, because, this is why members of Congress, by the way, shouldn't be allowed to own stocks at all because of this possibility of insider trading. But anyway, that's why there is a Nancy Pelosi stock tracker because she seems to be very well ahead of the trades. They're pretty good, unlike Marjorie Taylor Greene. That said, Danielle says, Marjorie isn't known for being the brightest crayon in the doll box. And there it is. Or this could be part of a strategy. Maybe she'll hold it until the election. Look, if Donald Trump wins, then that stock is probably going to go up. Let's be clear about that, right? And that's the whole point. If he loses, though, well, then it's going to be an absolute epic disaster. Not just for him, but for anyone else who's done enough to be holding on to that stock.
Hi, everyone. Happy Friday. It's 4 o'clock in New York. The NYPD, the Secret Service, a small army of lawyers, and the more than 500 New Yorkers who were told to report to jury duty on Monday are set to play a part in history, the first ever criminal trial of an ex-American president. Donald Trump, for the next 6 to 8 weeks, will be thrust into a role he has spent his entire life trying to avoid, that of a criminal defendant on trial, potentially inching closer and closer and closer to the one thing he fears most, according to his friend Chris Christie.
No matter what he says, no matter how he's bragging and going on about him not being afraid, he goes to bed every night thinking about the sound of that jail cell door closing behind him.
It's a soundbite that'll live forever. Compounding that specific fear, as told to us by his friend Chris Christie, as he sits at the defense table, the ex-president will have to watch many of his closest aides and former advisors and employees lay out in painstaking detail for a jury of 12 what prosecutors allege is an illegal scheme to cover up hush money payments made in order to hide damaging information from becoming public and being known by voters. This is what Judge Merchan will tell potential jurors Monday, quote, "The allegations are in substance that Donald Trump falsified business records to conceal an agreement with others to unlawfully influence the 2016 presidential election." Now, much of the evidence in this case is already known to us in the public. There's the tape of Trump talking to Michael Cohen about silencing Karen McDougal, which shows that Trump was deeply involved in a years-long scheme to suppress negative stories about himself.
I need to open up a company for the transfer of all of that info regarding our friend David. And I spoke to Alan about it when it comes time for the financing, which will be, listen,
What financing?
we'll have to pay you. So,
Okay.
no.
No. That's not how you do it. That's not how you silence someone before an election. And then there's Stormy Daniels. You all know Stormy Daniels. She's already come clean about the pressure she faced to stay silent.
So you signed and released a statement that said, "I'm not denying this affair because I was paid in hush money. I'm denying it because it never happened." That's a lie.
Yes.
If it was untruthful, why did you sign it?
Because they made it sound like I had no choice. The exact sentence used was, "They can make your life hell in many different ways."
And one of the key witnesses to all aspects of this, Michael Cohen, has already testified on exactly how the scheme works. Here's what he told Congress in 2019.
Mr. Trump directed me to use my own personal funds from a home equity line of credit to avoid any money being traced back to him that could negatively impact his campaign. The President of the United States thus wrote a personal check for the payment of hush money as part of a criminal scheme to violate campaign finance laws.
All of that, as dramatic and unprecedented and sordid as it is, could be the tip of the iceberg, though. In a brand new interview, Michael Cohen tells Politico that we are going to be surprised by the strength of the evidence. He says this, quote, "Most people don't really know anything. They only know what the headlines have been. And as you know very, very well, headlines do not necessarily tell the story. The country now on the verge of a watershed moment in American politics in the form of a criminal case against Donald Trump being laid out in a court of law." This is where we begin today with some of our favorite reporters and friends, all of them at the table today. New York Times reporter Kate Christobeck is here. She was a former assistant district attorney in New York City. We've been relying on your reporting all week about the jury process. We're glad that you're here. Also from the New York Times, political reporter and MSNBC contributor Nick Confessori is here. The host of the On Brand podcast, Donny Deutsch, is back, and host of Politics Nation right here on MSNBC. And the president of the National Action Network, the Reverend Al Sharpton, is here. So earlier in the week, you had this great reporting about the process for selecting a jury. And there's something so startling about how normal the process is. But tell us a little bit more about what exactly will happen on Monday.
I mean, that's exactly right. This is an unprecedented moment, but it's also so common. On Monday morning, we're going to see hundreds of jurors report to the Manhattan Criminal Courthouse. Some will know exactly the reason they're coming. Others might be surprised when they get there. They're all going to file in. They'll be welcomed by Justice Juan Merchan, who will explain to them parts of the case. And again, it's going to be like any other case, except that the former president will just be sitting feet away from them. He's going to describe to them the case and ask them point blank right away, do they have any reason that they can't be fair or impartial to the former president? And I think that's when we're really going to see opinions start coming up and how this is very different from your traditional criminal case.
I mean, in the context of politics, right, that question is asked to try to deduce who someone's going to vote for. How is that question asked in the context of selecting a fair juror?
I think that, first off, I think that the fair and impartial question is initially politically motivated, but the way I think it is asked for jurors across no matter what case it is. But in this case, it is likely going to elicit opinions that are directed to politics. But the way that Justice Merchan has structured the jury selection, the voir dire process, is that even if people don't initially flag that they can't be fair and impartial, there's many questions to come that can try to root that out. And as we reported, the questions start out very simple. They're going to be biographical, and slowly we will move into things that are won't be discussed. They're not going to at any point ask for who they voted for in the past, who they plan to vote for, or a person's political party registration, but they will ask, have you attended a rally for Donald Trump? Have you volunteered for Donald Trump, or anyone that would be considered anti to Donald Trump? So these questions will come up, and I think through admittedly 42 questions that are in the jury questionnaire, they will gradually try to find jurors that can be fair and impartial. It's an imperfect system. I think any lawyer would say that, and it really comes down to how truthful the jurors are as part of this.
What will the prosecutors be looking for in a juror?
Sure. I think through our reporting, we saw that the prosecutors they have come out and said that they really believe they would just want a fair and impartial jury. I mean, I think that they would certainly like to find people who are likely interested in the news, watch the news, or into media consumption. I think they're also going to likely try to find people who are highly educated, very along the lines of maybe people who would vote for the Democratic candidate. And conversely, I think Trump's team, as we reported, is going to be looking for people that men predominantly, and also trying to look for people who come from a working class background, who maybe are civil servants, so like police officers, firefighters, sanitation workers. But they're also going to be trying to look for people who may have felt that they've been wronged in the past by the criminal justice system. I mean, Donald Trump has routinely said that this is a witch hunt, that he's being persecuted by elected officials in New York City. And though many of the prospective jurors cannot relate to that specifics, they may have in their life or in a family member's life felt that they've been wronged by the criminal justice system. So trying to find people that they can relate to on that front.
Yeah, I mean, I think that's exactly what they'll be looking for. Michael Cohen is the fly in the ointment. This is the guy that got screwed. He doesn't have the sacks with McDougal or Daniels. He doesn't become president and move down to Washington and write cover-up checks from the Oval Office. He is the guy that takes out the home equity loan and sits in prison.
Yeah, I spoke to Michael a few hours ago, and he's very emboldened. I remember visiting him in prison, and he was telling me that the Braggs people were coming up the next day. I mean, the amount of hours that he's been prepping for this. I mean, he on the one hand, he cannot wait to get back and get vindication, frankly, and his life was ruined because of Donald Trump, because to your point, of all the things he did on his behalf, not for his own behalf. And he also, is kind of worn down. It's just like he can't get out. He served his time, he paid his dues, he took responsibility, and still he's paying lawyers' fees and he's doing all these things. But he's ready to go. He knows he's going to get grilled, but he knows there's corroboration. There's not just my word against your word. There's, as Lonnie talked about this morning on Morning Joe. So he's ready to go.
Let me show folks this is Cohen's lawyer, Lenny Davis, who's got a little bit of visibility into how this case was put together.
What other witness or witnesses do you think will most clearly corroborate his testimony?
Well, I'm going to answer your question according to public reports, because I was in the room with Michael for almost 2 years while the prosecutors crime that Michael was forced to plead guilty to, even though he really had nothing to do with it other than papering it. And that involved the National Enquirer and somebody named David Pecker. David Pecker testified in front of the grand jury that he met, and that's the word federal prosecutors used in their memorandum. Trump met with David Pecker to do a cash and kill scheme where the National Enquirer would pay off anyone coming with bad information about Donald Trump before the election.
So Michael Cohen, Donnie, has been in the public eye, but the National Enquirer piece of this hasn't. Just remind folks what this is.
Yeah, basically, a catch and kill is basically a bad story is going to come out, and you go to the publisher of the story and you offer up something in return to kill the story. And Trump was friendly with David Pecker, and this story was killed. And I think that's going to come out a lot in this case.
And, you know, again, we should say that it doesn't happen at the New York Times, it happens at the National Enquirer.
Yes.
This is, Alvin Bragg has made clear that this is not, and the judge has made clear as well in the instructions to the jurors, this is about cheating. And that is a much simpler story and true Trump strategy of I'm just like you.
Well, look, it kind of reminds me of Al Capone and getting him on taxes. It's the crime alleged is something that I think even a lot of supporters of Donald Trump would not have trouble believing was happening, and which has been corroborated in other contexts, the method, the motive, catch and kill, the hush money payments. So Karen McDougal is an example of this is the means by which Donald Trump gets rid of problems. It attests to that. But beyond that, this trial has a feel of like the season finale or the series finale of Seinfeld, where like everybody from Seinfeld's past comes to the jury box. It's like going to be Hope Hicks. It's going to be his former assistant in the White House. And Lanny Davis is in this, and then Cohen. And they're all coming to say, this is actually how it works. This is actually how it goes down.
Well, and look, I want to show, Alvin Bragg did a great interview with you. He's not the right person for Trump to rail against the way he rails against the DOJ and Merrick Garland and President Joe Biden. Let me show everyone your conversation with Alvin Bragg.
We're looking at the facts and the law and the facts as they develop. Right? We review documents, we talk to witnesses. And so, yes, we live in this world. We may hear what this pundit says and we may hear other commentary, but our focus is on the evidence and the law. I was, a public corruption prosecutor, federal and state, and whether it was Democrat, Republican, independent, former district attorney we prosecuted, an FBI agent, mayor, a deputy mayor.
So you have no fear going after people with big titles, even if they were president, and you have no fear of not going if
we follow the facts. Doesn't matter what party you are, doesn't matter your background. What did you do, and what does the law say?
This is a very inconvenient nemesis for he's almost, and I say this with admiration, boringly legally.
He is. I will say also with admiration, very boring. I know Alvin Bragg since he was running, and he's a Sunday school teacher. He's a home guy, and he is straight down the middle. We have in our National Action Network convention, he says, I'm coming, but I'm not going to talk about Trump, and he did a half hour with me yesterday. But the other thing I think that, in listening to her, that they are missing is that when Alvin Bragg's prosecutor stands up and says, yes, people do get jammed by the system wrongly. And let me give you an example. One guy was Michael Cohen. Another person we have an outside, I just left our convention, President Biden spoke virally. And I said after he finished to his top aide who did a fireside chat with me, I want you to meet somebody. I've had him stand up there, thousands of people there. This kid was arraigned in the same sentence street with 4 friends of his, a white woman in Central Park, and beating her. He was coerced into signing a confession at a teenage year in his life. He and 5 went to jail 13 years for something he didn't do. Somebody in jail finally said, they didn't do that. I did. The DNA matched. He got out. Donald Trump, who never took out any position on racial violence, police brutality, anything in New York, took out ads in the newspaper saying those 5 boys ought to be executed. Those 5 guys went to jail, and they sat in the same room or the same building Donald Trump will be sitting in Monday. So the irony of that is that I almost hope they talk about victimization, because they can then bring in how Donald Trump was on the side of people that were falsely accused. Michael Cohen went to jail for doing something for Donald Trump that Donald Trump has not been brought to justice. So if that's their line of defense, they can start getting ready to take the van to Rikers Island now.
It's such an important arc to draw for us, right? It's not just what we know about Trump that stretches to the beginning of his political career. It's what we know about Trump from his past life. And what we know about Trump from his past life is that he showed up in Washington so desperate to have the Justice Department stacked against him that he literally, fires Jim Comey the first month he's there after Flynn's indicted. I mean, everything that he did as president is almost a reaction or sort of a mirror inverse of the life he led before he was in politics.
Which, not to drift off the topic, should be a red neon
Feel free.
light
We have 2 hours.
to what's to come if he gets elected, because this time he's going to come stacked with pure
Vengeance.
and vengeance and retribution. And, this is, and it's interesting. Michael said this, that, he's worried if God forbid Trump gets elected, he's going to come after him again. This is what you're dealing with. But by the way, everybody in the Justice Department will be a Trump lackey, period. So give a kind of a thought to that, what that looks like going forward, with the commander in chief basically free reign to point his gun figuratively anywhere he wants.
You've done a ton of great reporting on Fox News. What's their posture on these facts in this trial?
I mean, their posture has always basically been the Trump posture. He's being railroaded, unfairly treated. Alvin Bragg is a partisan Democrat. Tish James is a partisan Democrat. There is no case against him that is ever not the product of malevolent forces, the deep state, the Justice Department, some other force. It's never fair. It's never a fair fight. It's always the world, the government, the deep state against Donald Trump. That's always been the narrative, because that's the narrative that their audience expects and wants. There's always some exceptions, right, on the air. But overall, they have conformed to the Trump narrative of the world, in which law and order is for him, not for other people. So law and order is really social order, with him coming out on top.
And that figures into some of the questions, right? People are going to be interested in what media the potential jurors consume, right?
Exactly. They're going to ask what potential media people watch, if they've had any family or anyone in law enforcement, if they've served on a jury before. But certainly, I think the times that I've sat on a Donald Trump voir dire before, I mean, I think that the media part generally elicits a lot of very interesting responses. And, especially at the paper, it's like interesting that a lot of people don't get their news necessarily from even traditional sources anymore. And then you start hearing everyone thing that was said. I think one time during one of the E. Jean Carroll trials, one of the prospective jurors, said something that made people think it was more of a right-leaning podcast. So those type of things are absolutely what the parties are going to be looking out for, and then further investigating once they get those responses.
Can I ask you a question?
Yeah.
It's not going to be hard to find out, basically, somebody's a Fox News person or MSNBC person who voted for who without asking. How does either a prosecutor or defense attorney get inside someone to say, okay, well, I know that person doesn't necessarily line up with him, but they can be objective on either side of the equation? I mean,
I think we are going to see that in action on Monday, that both sides, we will hear that people read or watch or listen to news in various different sources. And I think Justice Merchan has also come to this conclusion that just because someone gets their news from one location or another doesn't prevent them from being fair and impartial. I think it's the follow-up questions that are going to be asked after that.
For instance,
it's really, we'll see what Justice Merchan allows, but what you say you watch X network, what TV show do you watch? That kind of thing. But also after that question, there are dozens of other questions that they can continue to come back to and kind of go into further detail. So if someone were to say that they do get their news from Fox, then we will get a question further along that says, have you even subscribed to one of Donald Trump's listservs? So we'll gradually get into determining someone's loyalty to either the former president or even against the former president, depending on what that is. So I think Justice Merchan has been very forthright that he is not going to allow them to go into. But I think he said the reason why he's not allowing those questions is because these other questions will elicit that kind of information.
And it's just a moment where it says more than it probably has ever said before, right? If you certainly post a minion, it says a whole lot. If you get your news from Fox. All right, no one's going anywhere. There's so much with its promise to highlight the dangers of electing him to office again. We'll talk to the head of that group on how the trial plays into her efforts. We'll show you some personal testimonies from two-time Trump voters who are now saying never again. Plus, the ex-president continues to lie about the results of the 2020 race. He lost handily. Today, he's holding a so-called press conference on election integrity with an assist from the House Speaker, Mike Johnson, to spread the same big lie that led to the deadly January 6th insurrection ahead of the 2024 election. And later in the broadcast, Vice President Kamala Harris out in full force tonight in Arizona on the growing restrictions being put on women's ability to access health care in that state and around the country, laying the blame squarely at the feet of Donald Trump. We'll bring you those remarks when they happen. Also joining us, Chasten Buttigieg here in studio on that and what an extreme conservative Supreme Court could be planning next. All those stories and more when Deadline White House continues after a quick.
Back then or now?
Now.
They didn't want to hurt him.
You think it's because of a personal relationship with the guy who runs AMI is friends with Donald Trump?
Correct.
So again, Donnie, a jury is going to have to determine, as Judge Merchan said, whether these things were done to impact how voters felt about Donald Trump ahead of the 2016 election. And there's yet another witness who was paid money to stay quiet. Her story was caught and killed, who says yes.
Yeah, we haven't sat through the trial yet, obviously, but you see all the pieces. You see all the players. You see all the moves. And you kind of go, how is he going to be found anything but guilty? It's going to get worse when things happen with live flesh and blood. So I just, when you see the cast of characters and when you know the facts that we know already, forget what else there might not be there, to Michael Cohen's point that there might be surprises to coming, you go, how is anybody on a jury going to look at this any other way?
Right. And our system, as I know you're not saying anything other than this, the jury will make that determination.
Yes.
But a hallmark of Trump is that the things he's charged with usually aren't things that he denies to. Like, what's he going to say? No, I didn't.
No,
he's never said no, I didn't.
It's part of his brand. He's run on it, in effect. He's
Right.
run on, I don't pay taxes because I beat the system.
Right.
I'm too smart. They can't give me. I mean, this is
stole the documents because when you're president, you can.
And Trump University. You know what I mean? I got away with it. So it's like guys who scam, they're proud of it. It's like they think they're smarter than the next guy, that they're getting away with something, that they live above where everybody else lives. So his entire life has kind of bragged about how he thumbs his nose at various constraints that most of us live within.
I mean, and that was revealed, the E. Jean Carroll deposition. I'm not a lawyer, which I find to really make it harder to do this job. But his lawyers couldn't have thought it was a good thing that in his deposition, he confused E. Jean Carroll and Marla Maples, who he was married to. I mean, the recent history proves what Donnie's saying. He's not a great witness to his own fact patterns.
No, I think even in the political interview, Cohen said that he thinks Trump wants you to think he wants to testify.
Right.
He doesn't want to testify.
Right.
And in fact, I think there is pretty much no example I can think of where he's gotten to the point of having to really answer tough questions, where he's actually performed very well on that question. And I also think, as you said on the show before, I think years ago, him being in a context where he can't lie, where he can't make things up, embellish, bully, bulldoze, the tactics he uses to get through politics and campaigns, where he can't actually do that if he's on the stand, I should say. That must be horrifying to him, because those are tools of control and power that he has used all his life to make his way, to gain wealth, to gain influence, to gain office. And to not have access to them is really striking. It's kind of a final moment for him in a way. It's to me strange. This is the case where this is going to happen. Finally, I think an audience of people who've been, but it is. This is the first one to go.
I want to add into what Nick said about seeing a guy with no power. Anybody who thinks that, oh, this is good for Donald Trump because he looks like the victim and they're coming after him. No. You're going to see a guy who's neutered sitting in that courtroom, who is powerless. And that flies in the face that everything that he sold.
Yeah, and I mean, the evidence of that that there were 3 appeals this week. He lost all 3 of them, but trying so hard to make sure this trial doesn't start.
And like you said, Nicole, there were 3 attempts to try to put off this trial. I mean, we have said that delay is the favored tactic here, not just in this case, but in all the cases. And this week, there were 3 attempts with the appellate court to try to push off the trial. The appellate court didn't agree to stay any of them. Those appellate arguments will continue to be heard while we were undergoing this trial. So in addition, it's a coverage nightmare because we will be having people kind of covering the day-to-day of the trial, but also these appeals. It reminds me a lot of the civil fraud trial that we just experienced, where there were continuous appeals as the process was going. And I imagine we will continue.
Trump always does a volume business of chaos, and that's how he sort of politically Houdinis his way in and out of things. What do you think we should gird ourselves for?
I think that he's in a very different position now, because this is the first time not only have we had in history a former president on trial, it's the first time he's on a criminal trial.
Yeah.
So he's locked in that chair all day. And it's very difficult to try and tell your lawyers, because he operates like he's his best lawyer. There's no better liar in the world than me. I'm going to tell you how to do this lie. He can't focus on that and focus on organizing chaos outside. And he has to really be careful how he organizes chaos given January 6th, because he doesn't know if he's organizing guys that are going to end up testifying against him. The biggest problem he's going to have, on the next point about the state is after me, is the people that we know that may be the witnesses here are people he introduced the world to. We never heard of Michael Cohen. He delivered Michael Cohen. We never heard of none of them.
Yeah.
So are you tell me running for president and planted Michael Cohen in or planted the porn star there? No jury's going to believe that. These are your people. These are the people that you dealt with. How do you make a victim out of you? And Michael Cohen went to jail. I mean, if you're saying he only lied to get something done, then why did he do 2 years in jail? It's hard for him to sell this one. These are your buddies. These are ladies you knew, and you have to sit there 8 hours, and you may get an hour for lunch, and you can't orchestrate a rebellion outside because you're in there for the first time with somebody saying, sit in your seat.
It's amazing. It's amazing. And we really can't emphasize enough. We've never done this before as a country. How long do you think jury selection takes? Last question.
That's such a great question. I think that's the question on everybody's mind. I think it's at least going to take 2 weeks.
Wow.
I think we're also running into the Passover holiday. There's other complications that might arise during jury selection, but I think it's going to take at least 2 weeks. I mean, getting through
Michael's anticipating 3 weeks.
getting through hundreds of jurors with the same 42 questions. And as we, haven't mentioned, this is an anonymous jury to the public. The lawyers, Donald Trump, will know the jurors' names. We will not. So it will just be like a really interesting coverage perspective for all media outlets.
It's amazing. It's amazing. We're so great. I'm going to try to be.
I don't think they would pick you for this one.
I don't either. But I mean, this goes to I hope not, for everyone's sake. Kate, thank you so much. Thanks for being here. We'll continue to call on you. It's great to see you. Nick, Donnie, Rev, stick around. There's so much more. We'll look at how the trial could play out in the court of public opinion in this election year. How some Republicans have been convicted of a crime should that come to pass. That's next. For any of us, and for the disgraced ex-president in particular, it's one thing to be accused of a crime and rail against that or even be charged, but to be a convicted felon, to be found guilty by a jury of your peers of a serious federal offense, that could be something else entirely. Nobody knows in the eyes of the law and perhaps in the court of public opinion, even in this moment in our politics. Obviously, no one knows what the jury's going to decide. That decision will be up to them, and any decision is a long way off. But politically speaking, it's something Trump's been worried about for a long time, and it is at least worth exploring what could happen should Trump be found guilty in this case, in this trial set to start Monday in the state of New York? Joining our conversation is the executive director of Republican Voters Against Trump and publisher of The Bulwark, Sarah Longwell. Aller's still here. Sarah, what do you think about those questions?
Yeah, look, I think that when it comes to, it's so interesting, right? In the primary, when Donald Trump, all of his court and legal problems happened, that helped him, right? That helped to create this rally around Trump effect. But now going into the general election, he's got to move and attract a different type of voter. And those are the kinds of voters who do not want their president to be a convicted felon. Now, one of the things that's been helping Trump is that the sheer volume of his legal troubles create this phenomenon where voters, they kind of feel like it's white noise, like they can't tell one court case from another. And each of the court cases have all these mini dramas associated with them. Then there's the civil trials. And so it's all very complicated for an average person to follow. But as we get into individual cases, then the public has to sort of tune in and start to make sense of each case individually. Now, Republicans, I think, are glad this is the case that's going first because, they're going to have the whole right-wing infotainment media ecosystem sort of ramped up to say, porn star, porn star, porn star, this is unserious. This is just a witch hunt. But I think the extent to which about, passing bad checks or doing this sort of business fraud, anytime somebody is a convicted felon, it is not going to impact a huge number of voters, I think, because a lot of Trump supporters baked in, but it can impact that critical margin right now of voters that we kind of call the double haters, people who are kind of down on Biden, but they're also kind of down on Trump. A lot of those voters are still trying to figure out, who do I dislike more? Who do I really not want to be in the White House again? And I think that having somebody convicted of a felony who is your president, I think that's one of the things that could push some people over the edge.
Chris Christie's campaign during the primaries, Donnie, had some polling that suggested that exactly what Sarah's saying, in a general election, being a convicted felon is no good. And to Sarah's point, no one has run against Trump or has put a message before the country that
That's the end. I'm going to end this stream. I think y'all get the point.